I'll never forget the first time Karen blocked my driveway. It was a Saturday morning, the kind of morning I looked forward to all week. The smell of coffee filled the air. The sun was shining, and I was planning to take my truck out for a quick hardware store run. But when I opened my garage door, there it was, Karen's silver sedan parked right across my driveway, blocking me in completely. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she had visitors, maybe she didn't realize, so I knocked on her door. She opened it with that fake sweet smile people like her always have, and said, "Oh, I'll move it in a bit. I'm running late, you'll be fine." Then she shut the door before I could even respond. I stood there stunned, but I let it go. One time could be an accident, but it wasn't one time. It kept happening. Once a week, then twice a week. Before long, it felt like every time I needed to leave, Karen's car was in the way. Each time I knocked on her door, and each time she gave me a dismissive response. Sometimes she'd roll her eyes. Sometimes she'd laugh and say, "Relax. It's not like you're going anywhere important." That's when the frustration started turning into something else. Because I wasn't just dealing with an inconsiderate neighbor. I was dealing with someone who knew exactly what she was doing. She was the kind of person who got a thrill out of control, who believed rules didn't apply to her, and who thought the neighborhood belonged to her alone. I did what any reasonable person would do. I brought it up with the HOA. I figured surely they'd see this as a violation and put a stop to it. But after sending in my complaint and waiting for weeks, I got a letter in the mail. Not a letter addressing Karen's behavior, not a warning for her. Instead, it was a notice against me, a violation for improper vehicle storage. According to the HOA, my truck, which I parked in my own driveway, wasn't aesthetically compliant with community standards. I stared at the letter in disbelief. They completely ignored my complaint and instead fined me for parking my own vehicle in my own driveway. And the best part? Karen was the head of the HOA's parking and grounds committee. Suddenly, everything made sense. She wasn't just blocking my driveway because she was lazy. She was doing it because she could. She had the HOA on her side, and she knew it. Every time I tried to stand up for myself, the rules bent in her favor. Every time I complained, I was the one punished. Still, I tried to play it cool. I started documenting everything. Pictures of her car blocking my driveway, videos with timestamps, copies of every letter the HOA sent me. I wanted a paper trail. I thought, maybe if I collected enough evidence, I could appeal to the HOA board directly. But the more I collected, the worse it got. The next time Karen blocked me in, I tapped on her window while she sat inside scrolling through her phone. I said, "Karen, I need to get out. Can you move your car?" She looked up, smirked, and said, "You know, if you really had somewhere to be, you wouldn't live here. Maybe you should move, or better yet, park your truck somewhere else. This driveway doesn't really suit the neighborhood anyway." Then she put her sunglasses back on and went back to her phone. That was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with someone careless. I was dealing with someone cruel. Someone who enjoyed this. And the HOA wasn't going to help me. They were part of the problem. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Every morning before work, I had to play a guessing game. Would I be able to get out today? Some days I'd have to knock for 10 minutes just to get her to move. Other days, she'd deliberately take her time, sipping coffee in the driver's seat while I stood there fuming. Once, she even said, "You should thank me. At least this way, I know where you are." That's when I started thinking differently. If no one else was going to help me, I was going to have to help myself. Karen wanted a game. Fine, I'd play one. But I wasn't going to play it her way. One night, after she'd blocked me in again, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by all the paperwork I'd collected, HOA bylaws, state parking laws, municipal codes. I stayed up until 2 in the morning, reading, highlighting, making notes. And buried deep in the HOA's own rules, I found it. A clause that changed everything. It wasn't obvious. It was buried under vague legal jargon and technical wording, probably overlooked by most people. But it was there. A section about obstruction of ingress and egress. And it clearly stated that no resident, guest, or committee member could obstruct access to another resident's property. If they did, the affected resident had the right to have the vehicle immediately removed at the owner's expense without warning. I sat back in my chair, grinning for the first time in weeks. I had her. This wasn't going to be about petty revenge. This was going to be about using her own rules against her. Karen thought she was untouchable, but the HOA's own bylaws had handed me the weapon I needed. From that night on, every time Karen parked across my driveway, I didn't just get angry. I documented it. I logged it. I started preparing for the moment when I'd make her car disappear, do it so cleanly, so legally that she couldn't touch me. She thought she'd won. But the truth was, the game had only just begun. The very next week, Karen's car was there again, parked right across my driveway like it was her personal parking spot. This time, instead of knocking on her door, I just took out my phone and recorded everything. The car, the license plate, the timestamp on my phone. I even walked around and narrated the footage, pointing to the driveway and explaining how I couldn't get out. It felt different this time. I wasn't just a frustrated neighbor begging for courtesy. I was building a case. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Karen was her own worst enemy. She had gotten so comfortable blocking me in that she stopped caring about hiding it. She flaunted it, and that arrogance was going to be her downfall. Later that night, I made a call. Not to the HOA, not to Karen. I called the local towing company. I'd already double-checked the bylaws, highlighted the section, and printed out copies. I asked the tow company if they handled private property blockages. They said yes, as long as the law allowed it. So I explained the situation, even offered to show them the HOA rules in writing. The dispatcher hesitated for a moment, then said, "If that's all legit, then yeah, we can help." That was the first time in weeks I slept peacefully. The next morning, I woke up early, made my coffee, and peeked out the window. And sure enough, there it was. Karen's silver sedan, shining in the morning sun, sitting smugly across my driveway again. I didn't even hesitate. I dialed the tow company. Within 30 minutes, a big flatbed truck rolled down my street. The driver stepped out, glanced at the car, then looked at me. "You got the paperwork?" he asked. I handed him the printed HOA bylaws, the highlighted D clause, and my stack of evidence. He flipped through it, nodded, and said, "All right, let's do it." Watching that tow truck back up and hook Karen's car was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. The chains clinked, the hydraulics hissed, and slowly but surely, her precious sedan was lifted off the pavement. For the first time, my driveway was mine again. But the best part? Karen had no idea yet. She found out about an hour later. I was sitting on my porch when she came storming out of her house, sunglasses on, coffee in hand. She stopped dead when she saw the empty space. She spun around, looking up and down the street, then stomped over to my yard. "Where's my car?" she demanded. I took a sip of my coffee, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "Not blocking my driveway anymore." She exploded. "Did you have it towed? You can't do that. That's illegal. I'll have you fined. I'll have you arrested. You'll regret this." I calmly pulled out the papers I'd been carrying around for weeks, handed her a copy of the highlighted bylaw, and said, "Actually, Karen, it's right here in the HOA rules. The ones you enforce on everyone else." I just followed the book. Her face went pale, then red, then twisted into something between rage and shock. She snatched the paper out of my hand, skimmed it, and sputtered, "This doesn't apply to me. I'm on the committee." That's when I smiled and said, "Exactly. And that makes it even worse. You should know the rules better than anyone." She didn't have a comeback for that. She just stood there, shaking, fists clenched, before storming back into her house. 10 minutes later, I heard her yelling on the phone, probably with the HOA board or maybe with the tow yard. Either way, I knew this was just the beginning, because Karen wasn't the type to take a loss quietly. And I wasn't the type to back down anymore. That night, I got another letter in the mail. This time, it was an official complaint from the HOA. They accused me of unauthorized removal of private property. They demanded I attend a disciplinary hearing. But what they didn't realize was that I was more prepared than they ever expected. I had the evidence. I had the bylaws. And for the first time, I had the upper hand. Karen thought she could use the HOA to crush me. But she was about to learn that sometimes when you play games with the wrong neighbor, you lose everything. The HOA disciplinary hearing was scheduled for the following week. I walked in prepared, binder in hand, every page of evidence organized, labeled, and ready to go. The room was small, just a table with a few board members sitting stiffly on one side. Karen sat among them, arms crossed, glaring at me like I was her mortal enemy. The HOA president cleared his throat. "We're here to address a very serious matter. A resident has accused you of unlawfully towing her vehicle. Do you have a response?" I calmly set my binder on the table, flipped it open, and slid a packet of highlighted pages across to the president. Everything I did was within the HOA bylaws. Section 14, Paragraph 3, Vehicles obstructing access to driveways or common property may be subject to immediate removal at the discretion of the affected homeowner. The president skimmed the page, frowning. A couple of the other board members leaned in, whispering. Karen slammed her hands on the table. "That doesn't mean he can just tow my car. He did this out of spite. He's targeting me." I leaned back in my chair and said, "Karen, I documented every single time you blocked my driveway. 10 separate incidents in the last 2 months. I submitted complaints. You ignored them. The board ignored them. You left me no choice." Then I pulled out my phone, scrolled through the videos, and placed it on the table. Clip after clip showed her car sitting across my driveway, me unable to leave, timestamps proving the pattern. The room went quiet. One of the board members finally spoke. "Karen, did you really block his driveway this many times?" Karen's face twisted. She tried to laugh it off. "Well, maybe once or twice, but he's exaggerating. Besides, it wasn't that big of a deal." That was her mistake. Dismissing it, because the president was still staring at the highlighted bylaw, his brow furrowed. "Actually, Karen, this is a big deal. The rules apply to everyone, board members included." Her head snapped toward him. "Are you seriously?" Taking his side. "After everything I've done for this community," I seized the moment. "This isn't about sides. It's about fairness. If you're allowed to ignore the rules, then what's the point of having them?" The board members exchanged looks. One of them, an older woman who'd clearly had enough of Karen's antics, said, "He's right. We can't hold residents accountable while letting the board do whatever they want. That's not how this works." Karen turned red, sputtering, her words tripping over themselves. This is a setup. You're all against me." The president sighed. "Karen, we'll discuss this further in private. For now, I think it's clear that the homeowner acted within his rights." I stood, gathered my binder, and said, "Thank you for your time. I'll see myself out." As I walked out, I could hear Karen's voice rising in the background, furious, desperate, trying to claw back control. But the seed had been planted. The board was starting to see through her. When I got home, my neighbors were waiting. A couple of them gave me nods. One even clapped me on the back. About time someone stood up to her. One of them whispered. It felt good, really good. But I knew Karen wasn't done. People like her never stop. They just get sneakier. And sure enough, the very next morning, I found something new waiting for me. A bright orange violation notice taped to my front door. Apparently, my grass was half an inch too long. It was petty, was ridiculous, but it was also a warning. Karen wasn't backing down. She was escalating, and if she wanted a war, I was ready to give her one. The violation notice about my grass was laughable, but I knew exactly what it meant. Karen was going to abuse every ounce of her HOA authority to make my life miserable. That morning, I tore the notice off my door, crumpled it, and tossed it in the trash. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Within a week, I had racked up 3 more violations. One for leaving my trash bins out for too long, even though I'd brought them in the same day. Another for improper paint maintenance, which was ridiculous because my house was freshly painted last summer. And one more for a non-approved garden ornament. That ornament was a small flag in my yard. It was so obvious what was happening. Karen was weaponizing the HOA against me. I stayed calm though. I didn't argue. I didn't retaliate. I documented everything. Every violation slip, every petty letter, every timestamp. Because the truth is, I already had a bigger plan in motion, one Karen couldn't see coming. The final straw came 2 weeks later. It was a Friday evening. I was getting ready to drive out and meet a friend. And there it was again. Karen's car parked right across my driveway. She had this smug little habit of leaving her vehicle just far enough so that it blocked me from pulling out, but not close enough to technically say she was on my property. I walked over to her house and knocked on the door. She opened. It arms folded, smirking like she'd been waiting for this. Problem? She asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Yeah, I said evenly. You're blocking my driveway again. Move your car. She tilted her head and grinned. Relax, you can wait. I'll move it when I feel like it. Then she shut the door in my face. That was it. The moment I knew I wasn't going to ask anymore. I was done with her games. I went back inside, grabbed my phone, and made a single call, not to the police. Not to a tow company this time, but to a private contractor I'd been in touch with for weeks. The kind of contractor who specialized in vehicle relocation through loopholes most people didn't even know existed. That night, while Karen was asleep, her car was legally removed. Not to an impound lot, not to the towing yard down the street, but to a facility miles away somewhere she had no access to. Paperwork filed, fees charged directly to her through the HOA bylaws she loved to hide behind. The next morning, I heard her scream from across the street, pure panicked rage. She stormed into the middle of the road, yelling, "Where's my car? Who stole my car?" Neighbors peeked out from their blinds, some openly chuckling. Karen stomped up to my door and banged so hard I thought she'd break it down. When I opened it, she was red in the face, spitting fury. You did this. Where is my car?" I kept my voice calm. "Karen, if you parked illegally, maybe it got towed. You should check with the HOA office. I'm sure they'll have the paperwork." She froze. For the first time, I saw doubt flash across her face, because she realized she had no defense, no way to prove she wasn't blocking me again. And if the HOA actually had the records I'd filed, then she was trapped. That day, the HOA phones were ringing nonstop. Karen demanded her car back. She screamed at the board. But this time, they didn't rush to defend her. I'd already sent every piece of evidence I had to every board member. Neatly organized, showing her long history of abuse, And when she accused me of stealing her car, I dropped the final bombshell: the receipts, the legal paperwork. Every document showing the removal was 100% within HOA policy. Karen wasn't just humiliated, she was cornered. But the story wasn't over yet. Because when she tried one last desperate move to get back at me, that's when everything truly collapsed for her. Karen was furious. Losing her car had rattled her, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. That weekend, she stormed into the HOA meeting, demanding my immediate punishment. She tried to twist the story, claiming I had illegally stolen her car and that I was a danger to the community. But here's the thing. This time, the neighbors weren't on her side. Everyone had seen her antics for months. Everyone had heard her screaming, had watched her block my driveway, and many had even been her target before. For once, people weren't afraid to speak up. One by one, neighbors stood and shared their own stories, her threats, her petty rule enforcement, her constant harassment. The HOA board sat in silence, cornered. They knew they couldn't protect her anymore without exposing their own negligence. And when I calmly laid out my paperwork, the timestamps, photos, and signed authorizations, they had no choice but to admit it. Everything I did was perfectly legal. Karen's face went pale. She had been so sure of her power, so sure the HOA would cover for her. But now she stood alone. By the end of that meeting, the board quietly voted to strip Karen of her HOA authority. She lost her title, her influence, and most importantly, her ability to bully the neighborhood. Without the HOA shield to protect her, she was just another neighbor. And suddenly, she had no more power in the weeks that followed. Her car remained locked away, tied up in fees she couldn't escape. Her reputation was ruined. Neighbors avoided her, whispered about her, even laughed when she stomped around the street, still trying to act like she was in control. But the truth was, she wasn't. Not anymore. As for me, life went back to normal. My driveway stayed clear. My mailbox stopped filling with bogus violation notices. And for the first time in a long time, the neighborhood felt peaceful again. Looking back, I don't regret a single step I took. Karen thought she could control everyone through fear and intimidation. But what she didn't realize is that bullies eventually trap themselves. The harder she pushed, the more evidence I collected. And when the time came, all I had to do was push back calmly, legally, and strategically. Her car may have been the thing that disappeared. But in reality, what vanished was her grip on the community. And honestly, that's the kind of ending every HOA Karen deserves. Because at the end of the day, the quiet homeowner with patience and persistence will always outsmart the loudest bully on the block.